Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of the Remote Control Podcast. We were just with you last week when we did our Sonic retrospective. This is AJ, joined with Mark as last time, and we're also here with our good friend Justin.
What's up?
And today we're going to be talking about our favorite albums. So, the first thing that I want to say is I am a dumbass, and we have been talking about doing this for like a year. And at some point in between starting making our lists and actually setting down to record it, I thought we were doing top 15, but we were doing top 5 or top 10. So I have 15 here. So I'll figure it out.
I take as much of the blame for us not getting around to this for a while because I'm a lazy motherfucker.
And we just asked Justin to do this like 2 weeks ago.
I've been working on this for like 3 days.
It's okay. Mine's been completed for like a year, and then I just changed 3 things on it today. So we're going to do honorable mentions, and then we'll get into our albums. We're just going to go around the table one at a time and share. So we have 1 album per artist, no compilations or soundtracks, and just for fun, we haven't really seen each other's lists, so... Except for the fact that I seen Justin's when I had to fix it from being like a 0.2 size font, well, so that actually can.
When you try to print a cell phone on a printer, that you know.
But I didn't really see it. I saw some of them, but I didn't really see them. So we have some honorable mentions, which are exempt from the rules, and I guess we'll start on the left with Mark and his first honorable mention album.
Alright, for my first honorable mention album, I'm going to go with Sandinista by The Clash, which came out on December 12th, 1980, and is actually a triple album, well, back in the days when records still existed, which meant it would be, well, 3 records. And I would say... And Sandinista is the 4th studio album by The Clash. And The Clash are well known for being a punk rock band, which is kind of funny because most of their later stuff from like this point onwards, the previous album, London Calling, from that point onwards, they just start experimenting with a bunch of different genres like rap and disco and reggae and stuff like that. And this album's where it really gets heavy into the experimentation. And it's produced by the band and Jamaican musician Mikey Dread, I think it's pronounced. And that's all I got for that one.
Alright, you want to go, Justin?
Yeah. My first honorable mention is Pearl Jam's debut album, 10. Came out on August 27th, 1991. We don't use the term grunge in this house. But on a serious note, as much as they get lumped into the same term, the Seattle music scene of the early 90s, meaning like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, pretty much just Nirvana and Pearl Jam, Soundgarden gets lumped into, even though they didn't really get popular till like 3 years after, but you know. But this album, alongside what Nirvana was doing at the time, really brought the Seattle music scene into the mainstream, for better or worse. I say worse because, you know, grunge. I might be just looking at it with rose-colored glasses. That's why it's just in my honorable mentions. Not even touching my top 10. But, you know, I just can't get a Eddie Vedder's voice, to just be honest. It just clings to my soul.
Hell! Okay, so my first honorable mention is Crush 40's first album, Crush 40. They were actually previously known as Sons of Angels and released a self-titled album called Sons of Angels, which contains pretty much all of the same songs, with the exception of the addition of the 2 Sonic Adventure themes, Open Your Heart and Live and Learn. Jun Senoue is one of my favorite guitarists. Maybe his name's pronounced Senoue. I've never actually heard it said out loud. But, my other 2 standout songs from it are Revvin' Up and Watch Me Fly. And then we'll turn it over to Mark.
Alright, and for my second honorable mention, I have Utopia by Utopia, which this is actually their second self-titled album. First one coming out in 1974, this one coming out in 1982. And this came out on the Network Records, which was a subsidiary of Elektra Records at the time. And its genres are new wave and power pop, which are pretty much my bread and butter. And was produced by Todd Rundgren and his band Utopia.
I'll give you bread and butter.
Bread or your bud. I mean,
Show you my Utopia.
that's not what I meant to say, but okay.
I'll butter you, buddy.
But I feel like the album is a pretty consistent ride all from start to finish, and highlights for me include Hammer in My Heart and Say Yeah, and that's all I really got for that one.
Justin?
My second honorable mention might grind someone here the wrong way, but it's Metallica's Ride the Lightning album, their second album. Came out on July 27th, 1984. It's my favorite Metallica album, but I couldn't put it in the top 10 for very petty reasons. Mainly, I'm just a petty bitch. But
Richard Petty?
But, you know, probably the best riffs you'll ever hear on a Metallica album, especially bass, because, you know, Cliff Burton was still alive. You know, rest in peace, Cliff, even though he died, like, 50 years ago?
1986.
So
96.
43 years ago?
06.
No, 33.
16. Yeah. 30.
32 and some.
Something like that.
The most metal death ever, where, you know, he got a bus dropped on him, and then he lived through that, and they were lifting the bus off him and dropped it on him again. So, you know, rest in peace, Cliff Burton, even though you've been dead for, 33 years.
Alright, so my second honorable mention will be 1995, because I can't read apparently, even though I printed mine out. 1995's And Out Come the Wolves by Rancid. It was their third album. It is an all-around a fantastic ska punk album. Incredible variety in songs and sounds, fantastically relatable lyrics, and full of big, loud, all-together shouting choruses. Standout songs are Roots Radicals, She's Automatic, and As Wicked. And then we turn to Mark.
And for my next honorable mention, keeping in line with the punk genre, I've got Americana by the Offspring, which came out on November 17th, 1998, and was produced by Dave Jernin, which is the producer who gave us some of Social Distortion's hit albums. And to me, I feel like highlights are, well, the hit singles that everybody knows, like Pretty Fly for a White Guy and Why Don't You Get a Job. And this album has always meant a lot to me because it was one of the first albums I remember listening to as a kid. And I'm going to turn it back over to Justin.
Well, since you did punk and you did punk ska, I'll do what's considered ska but isn't. 40 Ounce to Freedom by Sublime, their debut album that came out on June 1st, 1992. Sublime's called a ska band, but there's a severe lack of trumpets. And, but Sublime was their own sound. They mixed reggae and alternative. And then, Bradley died and they got Rome and they suck now. So, yeah. 40 Ounce to Freedom is probably my favorite album of theirs. And it goes in tune with with their punk and punk ska bands.
Okay, so we each have a nice alcoholic beverage here to keep us in the spirit. And this is going to be unedited. I'm not taking anything out because we only have one microphone and we're just going here. So
whatever happens, happens.
Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself.
Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself. And also let it be known that on this day, the 3rd of January, it was technically yesterday, but Donald Trump killed an Iranian general and we're waiting to die by nuclear holocaust. So my
World War III.
Right. My third honorable mention for World War III is Hymn's album Deep Shadows and Brilliant Highlights, which was released August 21st, 2001. It was their third studio album and featured a significantly more synth-heavy and pop-oriented sound than their first two albums. I would say it's probably their most poppy album, except for perhaps Dark Light, which was their most critically acclaimed and commercially successful. It seems to be held in poor regard among fans. However, I am 27 now, and I am no longer in the core fan base of 15-year-old girls. So, I do not know how that has stood the test of time. This was the first album I had actually ever heard by him. And standout songs, I would say, are Lose You Tonight and Pretending. Then it'd be Mark.
And speaking of standing the test of time, now I wouldn't say this album really stands the test of time because it definitely shows that it came out in 1997. I got Duran's Midazolam, which is their 9th studio album, released on October 14th, 1997 on Capitol Records. And this was also the first album completely self-produced by the band, and the first album to not include their bass player John Taylor, as he had left during the recording sessions. And this is an album that means a lot to me as well, because I was going through a pretty tough time when I discovered this album back in like 2015, I believe. And so it's always had a special place in my heart. And I would say some of the highlights include the title track and Big Bang Generation, and the only remotely close to a hit single on it, Electric Barbarella. And the band's mostly known for being like an 80s new wave act, but by this point I would say this is a really solid album and doesn't get a lot of credit that I feel like it deserves. But off to you, Justin.
Speaking of bands that don't get any credit, this next album's from the Beatles.
Yeah, they've never been... no one's ever liked them. Also, did anyone else surprised that Duran released more than 2 albums?
Yeah, right.
They have like 14 or 15,
Jesus.
somewhere around that.
That is entirely too much.
But on a serious note, the Beatles album that didn't make the top 10 per the rules...
Yay rules.
Yay rules. A Hard Day's Night,
the rules. I have
released on July 10th, 1964, was their 3rd studio album. It got beat out by another album you guys will hear about later that holds a special place because, you know, the Beatles are good. You know, before 1970, music was good. How about that?
So, I just want to say, I honest to God love Hard Day's Night, and it's probably my 3rd favorite Beatles album. And it actually would have been on the list, but I picked a different Beatles album, which I'm going to talk about now, which is my 2nd favorite Beatles album.
Oh, yeah?
And that is the White Album. So the White Album, aka the Beatles, was released November 22nd, 1968. It was the 9th studio album, the Beatles' only double album, and it was the first album after the end of the psychedelic Summer of Love period. It has a far more stripped-back production, with fewer arrangements and less lush productions. It's often criticized for filler songs, to pad out their song count to get out of their contract that they had, but it is strongly regarded by fans. Since it's a double album, I'm going to throw out a couple extra standout tracks. I would say Happiness is a Warm Gun, Everybody's Got Something to Hide Except Me and My Monkey, Rocky Raccoon, and I'm So Tired. And with that, I have outed myself as a John Lennon fan. So, Mark, what is your last honorable mention?
Yes, for my last honorable mention, I'm going to take it back to 1985. I couldn't find the specific release date on it, but it just says 1985
He's going to take it
on all
forward to 1985.
Yeah, because you...
Mine was from 1968.
Yeah, you're going to take it forward.
But you see, I'm a
It's going
dumbass.
to take me back to the past.
But for my last honorable mention, I got Pictures for Pleasure by Charlie Sexton, released in 1985 on MCA Records, and was produced by Keith Forsey, who was a pretty big producer at the time.
There's a Leonard Skinner song called MCA.
And this would be his debut album, and at the time he was seen as a hot prospect because he was a skilled blues guitarist, but this album barely showcases his blues skills, as it kind of turns him into more of a new wave act, and that was probably why it wasn't as successful as it probably should have been. But I think it's a pretty solid album, and to me, I think standout tracks include the only hit he ever had, Beat So Lonely, and the opening track, Impressed. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Justin.
All right, now we're going to dial it back about 12 years, and actually backwards and not forwards, to March 1st, 1973, when Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd was released. It's their 8th studio album. It was the Floyd album I heard most growing up, and even though it gets slightly ruined for me by people saying that it lines up with The Wizard of Oz.
I was getting ready to bring that up.
Even though it does, but, I mean...
They did it on purpose.
Oh yeah, they did it on purpose. Yeah, they're sitting there in the studio like, Guys, this movie that came out 50 years ago.
Hey, they were really high.
Guys, this movie that came out 50 years ago, let's make this album, like, go with it for, like, the first playthrough, but, like, it falls apart after that, but no one will watch it that long, so they'll believe it.
Hey.
And then the whole thing where it was, like, oh, this mother vacuuming her living room while the album was playing, while The Wizard of Oz was on, discovered this. Like, no.
Because Pink Floyd started the rumor because they did it on purpose.
You know what I
You
think?
think in the 70s people weren't high enough to do weird shit like that?
Well, it's like when all those Paul is dead rumors were going around.
Paul is dead.
God damn it.
I am not a firm believer in that.
Okay, so...
The only tinfoil hat theory I believe is that Courtney Love killed Kurt Cobain.
That is 100% true. I don't care what anyone says. My last honorable mention is 1986, March the 3rd, which is Master of Puppets by Metallica, their third studio album, the last with Cliff Burton. I consider it to be an almost perfect album from songwriting, production, and just in general, with the tightest and most insane guitar sound that has ever graced metal music. It didn't make the list simply because there's another Metallica album that I am more partial to, and to comply with the rules, I bumped it off. Standouts, and I underlined it 3 times. The whole fucking album. Alright, so now we're going to get into our actual top 10s. So, because I was the dumbass and I accidentally picked 15, while we were talking, I actually went through and crossed out 4 to give myself 11. So, I was trying to find another one to cut off, and I just couldn't. So I guess I'll start us off.
Just do 2.
I'll just start us off, and then I'll just end. I guess that'll come back to me for the end or something. I'll start it off with what was originally my number 12. And that's Johnny Cash's American Recordings 5, 100 Highways. Released July 4th, 2006. It was the 93rd album by Johnny Cash. It was the first posthumous album that was released after his death in 2003. All the basic tracks were recorded by Cash during the American 4 sessions. Rick Rubin had Cash record as many songs, both originals, covers, remakes of old Johnny Cash songs, to ensure his legacy and the ability to release future albums. Tracks were then completed with help from Tom Petty and other famous musicians and country stars. It includes the last song Johnny Cash ever wrote, as well as a variety of covers. Standouts include Like the 309, the last original song penned by Johnny Cash, and the cover song Further On Up the Road. I almost chose American Recordings 1, but I opted for 5 because it is a dark and haunting album all throughout. And then I will turn it over to Mark.
And for my first one in the top 10, I got the self-titled second studio album, easily mistaken as the debut studio album, but his second album by Warren Zevon, and it is Warren Zevon by Warren Zevon. And this album came out on May 10th, 1976 on Asylum Records. This was produced by Jackson Browne, and I'm sure everybody knows who Jackson Browne is.
That one fucking guy who's... Yeah.
Can't
say that.
That one piano dude, right?
I can't say that. We will be demonetized, even though I don't make money off my channel.
But no, this is a really solid album all the way through, even though it's one of them singer-songwriter 70s albums, which we'd get plenty of that kind of crap throughout the decade. But this one kind of stands out because his lyrics are actually intelligent lyrics. And
Ow! Werewolves of London!
Well, this was before that. This was before he actually hit big. But this album has tracks like Frank and Jesse James, which talk about Frank and Jesse James, and then tracks about heroin addicts and all kinds of weird stuff. And it's a really solid album all the way through. And I'm going to turn it to Justin.
First in my top 10 is an album released by B.B. King in 1985. It's called Six Silver Strings. The album itself is not highly regarded, so much so that I couldn't find a specific release date for it. It was also his 30th studio album at the time, which he put out albums for almost 30 years after that. But, there's a couple tracks on it that really scream like the beginning of blues to me, even though it came out like 30 years after he started performing. Songs like My Lucille, which is his favorite guitar that he once went to a burning building to save.
That's one does. I would.
Memory Lane, My Guitar Sings the Blues. Double Trouble.
Stevie Ray Vaughan and the...
Listen. But
listen.
more so brought up B.B. King, not so much for the album, even though the album does include most of the songs I can name most of the time off the top of my head. But B.B. King is really the reason we have most of the other songs, if not all the other songs on my list. Anything from modern rock to hard rock, pretty much anything in the past 60 years can be attributed to the groundwork artists like him and Muddy Waters laid. He also had pioneered what is known now as like the earliest form of like a guitar solo. It was single note solos, but it was still like the earliest form of soloing that you hear in popular music.
You can trace just about everything back to the blues.
Yeah, if it weren't for the blues, we wouldn't have anything. So, not so much for the album, but more so for the artist and what he did. That's why he's on the list.
Okay, so I will go into my actual top 10 now.
There you go.
So I want to do Less Than Jake's album, Anthem, released May 20th, 2003. It was the 5th studio album. This is actually their highest charting album to date, but I feel Hello Rock View is more well-known and more well-remembered, mostly because that was their big hit single, All My Best Friends Are Metalheads. But the theme of isolation, alienation, growing up, changing, moving on, leaving the past behind you really hit home with me. There are less horns on this one, which is not cool, but the fantastic songwriting helps ease the pain. Standouts include Motown Never Sounded So Good, The Science of Selling Yourself Short, and in recent years, what's become probably my favorite Less Than Jake song, The Brightest Bulb Has Burned Out / Screws Fall Out. And then it will go to Mark.
And for that, for my number 9, I've got Southern Accents by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, released on March 26, 1985. And this is their 6th studio album. And it was produced by Petty and David Stewart of Eurythmics. And it was released on MCA Records. Now, one thing that's always stood out to me about this album is just how all over the fucking place it is, because during sessions they were all coked out of their minds, and it even got to the point to where Tom Petty got so mad that he couldn't even record like one guitar track, so he broke his hand by punching a hole in a wall. But to me, standouts include Don't Come Around Here No More, and then the title track's a really good piano ballad about life in the South, and the album originally started off as a concept album about life in the South before they all got coked out of their minds.
I'll give you Life in the South.
But I mean, even though it's kind of a bumpy ride, it's still a pretty good album in my eyes.
NASCAR on NBC.
Did you finally get a sponsor for the podcast?
This race.
And around, goddamn, and around goes the microphone.
This race is sponsored by Symbicort.
Just like you, Grandpa.
You little. Oh, shit. The next album on my list. Originally, we had a rule of no live albums, but we kind of changed that rule because of me, because of this album. Released on January 3rd, 1968, live at Folsom Prison, Johnny Cash. It's one of the greatest live albums, in my opinion, by arguably one of the best vocalists of all time. This album not only rejuvenated his career, which was on a downswing at the time, it also helped him transcend country music to become a cultural icon. And the years following, he would not only use his place on the world stage to take down cultural barriers on his television show, which inevitably got it canceled, he also went toe-to-toe with President Nixon when Nixon wanted him to play classic country songs for him, and controversy with the Vietnam War was going on, and Cash sung a song about how our boys don't need to go to war.
Nixon always wins.
And it really leads you to think, if Johnny Cash was alive now, how many times would he have kicked President Trump's ass across the Great Lawn? I'd wager about half a dozen.
This podcast is brought to you by the Republican National Convention
and the NRA.
proud sponsors of the NRA, Bass Pro Shops, Bristol 500. However, I do want to say I love that album so much. My favorite thing about Al Folsom Prison is that he only plays a handful of really well-known Cash songs. He plays a lot of songs about prison life, about murder, about really dark subject matter that when he was supposed to get approval for the set list from the prison guards, but he actually ended up going out and they told him not to play songs about murder, not to play songs about prison, and he basically told them politely to go fuck themselves. And I believe he actually says something like that about during the album about how they told him not to play those kind of songs. Then there's a really good one on there, You Dirty Old Egg-Sucking Dog, Flushed from the Bathroom of Your Heart, and Cocaine Blues is probably my favorite from that album. I love that album. I might have put San Quentin on there over it.
I'm more familiar with San Quentin myself.
But
if it weren't for Folsom, you wouldn't have got San Quentin.
They're both really good. You should listen to Live at Folsom Prison. I have the record. Yeah. Oh,
quick,
God,
quick,
baby.
let's play and get the video taken down.
Look at him. Look at
This video has been removed from copyright.
video's blocked in your country.
It's always-
President Trump blocked it.
But no,
I talked about
they always
Johnny
get
Cash
blocked
kicking
in
his ass.
Germany for some reason.
So, my 9th album is Ozzy Osbourne's debut solo album, Blizzard of Oz, released September 20th, 1980. So, I am not a big fan of Ozzy's solo career. I like him in Black Sabbath. I like Dio Black Sabbath more, which, automatic crucifixion on the internet if you post that on, like, r/music or whatever. But...
You music incel.
Right. But it gave us Randy Rhoads' introduction to the world stage. He previously played with Quiet Riot on their first 2 albums, which were only ever released in Japan because they were trash hair metal albums. Well, I should say proto hair metal albums because it was 1977. But Randy Rhoads' guitar work is the star of the album, proving undeniably throughout why he is the best. With an insane and iconic fusion of classical music with heavy metal. You could have also argued for Diary of a Madman, though I ended up choosing this one specifically because I feel the songs as a whole are better crafted, but I feel his guitar work shines better on the Diary album. Randy Rhoads inspired me to take my guitar playing to levels that I've never been at before, and is still my inspiration as my favorite guitar player. The standouts for me are picked mostly on Randy Rhoads' guitar work. Goodbye to Romance is one of my favorite solos by him. Mr. Crowley is probably his most iconic guitar solo. And Steal Away the Night is just ultimately a hard-rocking classic from the album.
The fact that you really like Dio Black Sabbath kind of makes me wonder how much shit I could start for saying I like Van Hagar more than David Lee Roth's Van Halen
I
stuff.
like Leonard Skinner after the plane crash.
Oh, God. But no, for my number 8, I've got everything...
Leonard Skinner will be better than the last original member.
Oh,
died.
no.
And now we're going to anger the Southern Democrats. Southern Democrats.
Do those exist?
They used to.
Well, they did in that Alabama song.
I don't want to start talking about politics, man.
No.
Yeah, we should talk about Johnny Cash coming back from the dead and kicking Trump's ass.
I wish.
But no, for my number 8, I've got Everything to Everyone, which is the 6th full-length studio album by Bare Naked Ladies and was released on October 21st, 2003 on Reprise Records. And this album continues more of a mature songwriting path that the band had been taking since their 4th release, Stunt, and features more kind of political and social commentary, although while retaining some catchiness and a couple of goofy songs here and there, like Another Postcard, which is just about getting monkeys in the mail.
Sea monkeys. Everybody takes care of sea monkeys.
And this would also be the first album since, I believe, Gordon, their debut, that they didn't have any outside songwriters on, and would continue a trend until the lead singer Stephen Page left in 2009. Hopefully one day he comes back. And on that note, I'm going to turn it to you,
Hang on,
Jason.
I got a question for you, Mark.
Huh.
So on your list, did you put that stupidly expensive and stupidly rare Jay Giles album that really sucks?
No. I mean, while I do like a lot of albums that sucks, I had actually considered that, but no.
What was that called again?
You're getting even while I'm getting
that's
on.
it.
It's really not that bad. Everybody just gives it shit because the lead singer left before it came out.
Okay, Justin.
Alright, since you wanted to strike that chord, I'm going to go straight for the other. My next album, released on September 29th, 1992. It was this band's second album.
Oh, Mark's not going to like this. I think I know what it
The
is.
band was Alice in Chains. The album is Dirt. Which
I am Iron
I'm sorry, I'm just not the biggest Alice in Chains fan.
you should be. They're sad boy music.
There's a lot of 90s music I just can't get behind.
But anyway, on a personal note, it's an album that defines the 90s in my own mind. Alice in Chains just hits that vein right with their gritty, at times almost desolate sound. From the title track to songs like Them Bones, Angry Chair, and Wood, each track just hits right. And it just right, like it just crawls up under you.
I'm not gonna lie, I always get that one part of Them Bones stuck in my head and it always cracks me up.
Ah!
Dun, 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 ah!
Told you.
Dun, 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 dun.
Mark is peaking my podcast.
Yeah, I was going to say, like,
It's okay. Every time we laugh, it just fucking just walls.
yeah.
It's the one mic setup.
Rooster's probably the best song off the album just because every time I listen to it, I'm just like, it's me against the world.
Well, I mean, Vietnam.
Yeah, that's true.
Charlie intensifies.
Oh god. Oh, okay. Okay. Dude, my mom was the one who got me into Alice in Chains, but I really need to listen to more Alice in Chains.
My brother always used to listen to it. That's probably why I don't like him that much, because,
Maybe you just listen to them on your own.
yeah.
I really love
I
Dirt.
shouldn't base my opinions off other people.
So my 8th album is Megadeth's Rust in Peace. So this is not surprising considering it's their most beloved album, like pretty much by far, other than Peace Sells. It's released September 24th, 1990. It's their 4th studio album. This is the first album with a new lineup featuring new drummer Nick Menza and new lead guitar player Marty Friedman, which...
Dave Mustaine and new guitar players? Come on. No.
So, this is what most people consider the iconic Megadeth lineup that lasted until 1997. This is one of the most technical thrash metal albums ever released. It's the absolute peak of Megadeth's complexity and technicality. Great speed. Dave has great songwriting. Some people would call it a flawless album. I, however, think it's bloated, despite its 9-song track listing. I think there are 2 songs that could have been cut, which is Poison Was the Cure and Take No Prisoners, and I've gotten downvoted probably hundreds of times on the Megadeth subreddit for saying that, because they are decent songs with cool riffs, but I think they're both really short. They're each like 2.5 minutes long, but I think that they're just filler songs.
Just combine them, make one long song.
Like, they got cool riffs, but neither one of them particularly stand out in songwriting or anything.
Let's just combine them, add another 3 minutes of pointless drums, and turn the snares off. Oh, wait. Sorry, wrong band.
So but yeah, it's not a long album. It's a pretty short album. But I think about shaving those 5 minutes off would have made it a flawless album, and I would have put it on par with Master of Puppets. Standouts include Tornado of Souls, which is by far and away the greatest probably guitar solo I've ever heard, and the title track Rust in Peace Polaris, which actually does not have a guitar solo. And then I'll hand it over to Mark.
And for my number 7, I've got Watchdog, which is the debut studio album by American songwriter-singer Jules Shear, released on March 4th, 1983 on EMI Records. And this album was...
EMI!
And it was produced by studio wizard Todd Rundgren, and unlike most of Todd Rundgren's productions, which he has a knack of making a lot of the bands he produced sound a lot like him, which can either be a good or bad thing depending on how big of a fan you are, but Jules Shear's material kind of shines through most of his production and stands on its own. And this, I would say, highlights include Whispering Your Name and the ending track, which I annoy the crap out of you playing on bass all the time. I think, yeah, it's called Marriage Made in Heaven. And... But no, it's a pretty solid album. Contains flavors of new wave, pop, R&B. And overall, I think it's one of those albums that really deserves more attention because it just kind of disappeared off the face of the earth as soon as it was released. But on to you, Justin.
Last time the 6-car won a race. The time before that.
We need to do a NASCAR podcast. We could really do this.
Good luck, Ryan.
You're going to need it. My number 7.
This guy got a top 15. Shit.
We're devolving into madness.
It's fine. We're only 35 minutes in.
Madness, our house. In the middle of... Oh, never mind.
Our house.
Wrong madness.
In the middle of our house. Our house.
In the middle of our
I think I got a can of Maxwell House here somewhere.
There's definitely a commercial with cockroaches singing that song. It's like a Terminex commercial.
We're going to get copyright strike for singing commercial jingles.
Oh,
All beef patty, special sauce, 2 booze, and a sesame seed bun.
Those were the days.
Quick, top 10 commercial jingles.
Oh, God. FreeCreditReport.com.
Should have seen it coming at me like an atom bomb. They monitor your credit and send you email alerts so you don't end up selling fish to tourists and t-shirts.
Hey, just
it's my
Offer
money.
all triple advantage.
It's my money, and I need it now.
That spells free credit. Hey, just as long as all it gets blocked in is Germany, we'll be all right.
If we sing it bad enough, we won't get blocked.
It's my money, and I need it now.
Go Goldie. Go Goldie.
Call 346-5990.
What was that? Farmer Klein Campbell was the way to
Yeah.
What was that one where the phone number was literally just
3,
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9? God damn it. No one's going to get this.
I know.
No one's going to listen to this from around here.
Only 50 miles from I-71.
It's cheap.
What's your
cheaper
number?
in the country?
When we were watching that fucking race,
God,
and
no.
literally every time we went to commercial was that same, what's your number
man.
commercial? We have gone on a huge tangent. Okay, Justin.
Yeah.
Number 7 for you. That's what makes podcasts great.
Told you I should have included that Bud Light collection in my list.
Should have been in the honorable mentions.
Real men are genius.
Here's to you, Mr. Guy who invented long, drawn-out tangents on podcasts.
The guy who's been long drawn out tangents on podcast.
I gotta bring it back down a few notches.
Take a drink.
Oh shit!
Delicious Mike's Harder Black Cherry. What are you drinking, Mark?
What is that?
TGI Fridays brand mudslide.
That is old.
Yeah, it don't taste very good, and it's been in your guys' freezer for a long time.
Since
but
Halloween.
And I have caramel Southern Comfort.
Southern
Soviet Union.
concept album about the South.
Quick, let's get to Kraken.
Oh, God. Release the Kraken!
I don't want to die yet.
Release the Kraken.
It's bad enough Iran's gonna kill us.
We need to do top 10 parody albums. I have like 20.
All of them Weird Al.
No, I got
That album
I
I consider to be the best folk album of all time by Swag Ninja. The Earth Goddess is pregnant with my unborn child. Featuring the opening track, I Like Girls with Dicks.
I think
I don't know. I got a band that's just big on YouTube. It's just a 2-person band. It's called Ninja Sex Party, but neither of them can get laid.
that
You can download my band's album at Bandcamp or thinfallcaesar.bandcamp.com. It's Name Your Price. We released it 7 years ago.
You're supposed to wait until number 1 at that time.
Well,
That-
look.
one day I'll
This
have,
whole thing's just a giant plug.
one of these days
Whoops.
I'll release music, but I gotta write it first.
If you
And learn how
also
to
go
play
to our
instruments.
Bandcamp, we have our complete discography available for free. Every live show we recorded and all of our demos. It sounds terrible, but you can listen to it if you so
I got
desire.
to thinking about parody album, and I got to thinking of that Beatles parody band, The Roodles, and they had this, it was like some group in the 70s, and they had this album called All You Need Is Cash, I think it was.
What was that other one? It was like Metallica Beatles mashups. I can't remember what they were called now.
I can't remember either.
But you know what we're talking about. All right, Justin's number 7 now. We derailed this by like 5 minutes.
It's fine. I'm pouring more drink.
Padding.
He's pouring him some delicious Sunny teas that when they sponsored Ricky. Oh, never mind.
Oh, no.
I don't want to date this podcast any more than it's already dated.
January 3rd, 2020.
That's when it's
At
not
2:28 a.m.
It's not going up till January 9th.
Oh.
I'll put it up tonight, whatever.
January 12th.
You gotta upload it on the anniversary date of the last episode.
Which was just last week, so you know.
Oh.
Let's just wait another year and put it out.
Shit.
All right. Let's dial back in.
Yes.
Number 7. Released March 8th, 1994. The greatest album released in 1994.
Throwing Copper by Live.
The Blue Album by Weezer.
Super Unknown by Soundgarden. It's far and away my favorite Soundgarden album. Rip Chris Cornell. I cried when I found out he died. I legitimately did. I'm a bitch.
You could turn that into a Soundgarden song.
I really could. I'm crying 'cause you're dead. Her.
There's a tear in my beard.
Well, at least the boys' taste in music's getting better.
The layering of his vocals on his own will make the sound great, even if it was just his vocals and nothing else for the entire album. Notable tracks include the entire album, but specifically Fell on Black Days, Spoon Man, Black Hole Sun. All songs that mean just as much today as they did 25 years ago, even though I haven't been alive 25 years yet. But you know.
You can't see it, but I'm holding up an album to the screen.
Ace of Spades! The Ace of Spades!
There should have been, my list should have just been Motorhead.
Alright, I don't
Top
know.
20 albums of 1994. Go! It's all just Weezer.
I don't got anything else.
The unreleased follow-up to In Utero that was supposed to promote Nirvana on the Lollapalooza tour in spring 1994.
Oh no.
My next album is actually... It came out in 1995. So...
Hey, it's my birthday year.
Hey, this is Green Day's Insomniac, released October 5th, 1995. It is the follow-up album to Dookie. And apparently Green Day themselves do not like this album. I read an interview where Billy Joe called it their major label's sophomore slump, and that they thought it was a filler album in their discography.
Yeah, but when does anything Billy Joel says actually mean anything?
Oh, he's the piano man.
Shut up.
For a song called The Piano Man, that harmonica guy just never shuts the fuck up.
Personally, I think it's the most aggressive album they ever put out. It's raw, heavy, and unpolished, and incredibly punk rock down to its core. It's very abrasive, has tons of off-putting production compared to Dookie, but contains some of the strongest songs they've ever put out. It's neurotic, paranoid, and claustrophobic. It captures the feeling of anxiety better than any album I can personally think of. Standouts include the appropriately titled Panic song, which Billy Joe wrote about having a panic attack and the feeling of a panic attack. Babs' Uvula Who, which is probably my theme song of Green Day songs. And then the one of the few pop songs on the album, Stewart and the Avenue. And then we go to Mark.
Are we going to keep it in the 90s, Mark?
Now I'm taking it back to 1981. And this time I actually am taking it back, unlike the time I said earlier when I took it forward and I said I was taking it back.
Well, eventually, if you go
That's like
back...
those people who say, I'm going to come up there, but they live north of you.
Well, it's like if
But
you
they're
go...
actually going south.
Or like, yeah, we're going down to Chillicothe, y'all. Oh, wait, now we're doxing ourselves.
Maybe the last time I met in 1985 BC.
But that's west of here, not south.
It's north.
Yeah, maybe the last time I met in 1985 BC and
Northwest.
the last album was Ooga Booga or some shit.
Listen, we're just going to go down to Canada later.
Fine with me.
My top album of all
Free
time
weed.
is so I don't know if people have ever seen it, but they saw that you could actually record a sound in lines in pottery, and they've taken old pottery that has lines in it, and they've been able to hear sound very faintly of whoever was making the pottery. And mine is whatever was the first guy to ever make a pot. And you just hear some some weird, like, 30,000 years ago noise.
Ooga booga ooga ooga.
Ooga chaka, ooga chaka, ooga 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 chaka.
When your cave painting only gets 3 boogas. But no, for my number 6, I've got Working Class Dog, which is the 4th studio album by Australian rock musician Rick Springfield.
I didn't realize he was from Australia.
Yeah. And it was released on the RCA Records label and produced by Bill Drescher and Keith Olston. And this would be the first album that really turned Springfield into a success because he had that. This was the album that had Jesse's Girl on it. And
I remember I used to sing that to Jesse.
And to me,
Jesse's Girl.
I mean, I did have a thing for Tiffany there for a while, but at the time I was single and so was Jesse, so...
But to me, I consider this album a classic of the power pop genre. And I think highlights not only include that track, but Love Is Alright Tonight, and I would say Hole in My Heart's a pretty good one too. And it was also produced in that famous Sound City studio that Dave Grohl doesn't shut the fuck up about.
Hey, we'll get to Dave Grohl later.
Yeah.
I have a Foo Fighters tattoo, and they all rag on me because
I'm not gonna lie though.
If anyone wants to know, my number 1 album has Dave Grohl on it. So
I'm not gonna lie though. That was a pretty good documentary.
my number 1 album was recorded at Sound City. It has Dave Grohl on it.
I'm not looking it up. I don't care. I'm just going to go straight into my number 6. No more tangent. No tangent this time. No.
Number 6. Why was 6 afraid of 7?
Cause 7, 8, 9.
Because
I quit. Fuck this shit.
no, it's because 7 was a six offender.
Yeah.
Oh.
All right. So this is at number 6. So if anybody wants to come fight me, you can come fight me.
We are located at... Well, I'm not going to say.
No.
I was going to give out the Weaselab address.
It's bad enough the government already knows.
Right? But,
We are located in the woods in Ohio. Good luck.
Middle of fucking nowhere.
I live on Dale Jr.'s hunting property in Ohio. And he never shuts up about it on the Dale Jr. download.
In the last place I used to live up the street, there's this road called Dale Earnhardt Drive, but I'm pretty sure that was just somebody's custom road.
So, released June 29th, 1999. Slipknot's debut self-titled album.
Was that the one with I pushed my fingers into my eyes?
No.
What is that? Before I Forget?
No, that's not.
Okay.
That is.
That's like 2003 or something.
Yeah, it's one of the later ones.
Never went out of my way to listen to Slipknot.
I just know that song because it was in...
Slipknot's debut album was and still remains to me one of the most defining metal albums of the last 20 years. We're going to pretend it's 2019 still because...
To be fair, we were supposed to do this podcast like 2 years ago.
Yeah, I wrote this.
What are you talking about? We just released episode 1 last week.
Oh, shit.
Whether for better or worse, this album has inspired and helped shape the metal we get to hear in the 21st century. I emphasize the worst, but also the better, because without them, we wouldn't have...
Saint Anger.
I will admit, Corey Taylor is a fucking tool, and Joey Jordison is an overrated asshole at best.
I can play drums better than Joey Jordison.
I've got a $2,500 thimble with that guy. Come buy it.
I just remember everybody in school wearing Slipknot shirts.
I'm a raging cuck.
But if it weren't for Slipknot helping break into not necessarily the mainstream, but grinding out a piece where it's sustainable for other bands to come along in the last 20 years, we wouldn't have them. That means we get some good bands.
And the greatest metal album of all time, Saint Anger.
And we get some bad bands like
Clank.
Metallica when they put out Saint Anger, and Suicide Silence, and Hawthorne Heights, and listen, I'm not getting into it. I could go on for a little bit about the bands that we shouldn't have because of it, but we have some good.
Not all of them are terrible.
You're wearing an Angels and Airwaves shirt.
Yes.
I'm wearing a Pontiac Trans Am shirt.
I'm wearing a blue shirt.
With a pocket.
Oh boy.
It's got pockets. Thanks, it's got pockets.
I put my phone in it.
There's a hole in my pocket where my money should go.
Number one favorite album of all time, Big Mountain Fudge Cake by Big Mountain Fudge Cake.
No, Big Mountain Fudge Cack.
We wore those Fudge Cack t-shirts with pride.
Hey, John Redcorn, did your people ever celebrate Thanksgiving?
We did once. At night I like to brush my eyes, clean my wrists.
I don't know who you are, but I know where you live.
Dale?
You better not teach that sex ed class, Peggy Hill.
Hey Peggy, it's Dale.
You don't know who I am, but I know where you live. Are you done, Justin?
I brought up Slipknot. Everything died.
What even is this podcast anymore?
Not even an hour long yet.
Oh, damn.
And we're already halfway done almost.
Hey, good thing we're just fucking around at this point.
Right. Alright, so I guess I'll jump to my number 6, which is actually like an independent band, so that's cool. They're on an indie label. My number 6 is Long Ways, Come and Get It, released December 26th, 2006 through the independent label Old Shoe Records. This was their first album. They are from California. I saw them at Warped Tour 2009 on like the, I don't know what stage you would call it, but it's the one where they just picked like 5 local bands and was like, okay, I guess you can come along with us.
I guess we'll never know now that Warped Tour doesn't exist
So,
anymore.
the thing that drew me to see the band was they had a big sign in front of the stage that said, if you like punk rock, come here. And it had a big eye patch on it. And when we got to the stage, there was like 15 people. When we got to the stage, the lead guitar player had an eye patch on that said out of order. And they are balls to the walls blast. It's honestly the kind of music I'd always want to see myself writing. It's punk, but with a songwriting edge that you just don't see very often in punk. It's catchy. The melodies are good. It's well written. Lead singer slash guitar player. I couldn't find his actual name. He's just listed on the album as Brian Longway, but I don't think that's actually his name. Just writes great riffs and great music. And you probably heard Justin blow his nose. If not, I made you aware. This is an unknown punk classic. Go out of your way to find it. They have CDs. I've seen it for sale on CD Baby and on Amazon. I don't know if it's released digitally. They only ever put out one other album, which was their second album, Junkie, in 2009, which is also a fantastic album. And I remember looking up one of their videos on YouTube from the Warped Tour that I seen them at, which was my first Warped Tour, and I actually found myself in the video. And then I was looking at the comments, and I saw a comment from someone who said, "Hey, Uncle Brian, I just want to let you know that I really love your band. And I think you're really talented." And I thought that was heartwarming, but also a little bit weird.
And I'm still a little upset about when I was going back through this. Well, when we went to Warped Tour 2016, I'm still mad that I couldn't find us in any of those videos.
But my standouts are Ton of Bricks, That's Just Right Now, and a song that would make my top 10 songs of all time, Light On in the Hallway. Okay, Mark.
And for my number 5, I've got Heartbeat City by The Cars, which is their 5th studio album.
Hey, look, I didn't cross anything out on
and was
this page.
released on March 13th, 1984 on Elektra Records. And this album was produced by mega producer Mutt Lange, who's best known for producing all Def Leppard. Well, he's best known for producing all Def Leppard's big albums and stuff.
AC/DC.
And he was married to Shania Twain at one point.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so there was that. But this album, to me, I consider it to be quintessential 80s new wave. This album is perfect mix of keyboards and pop and rock. And, well, there's not as many guitars as as there were on the previous albums, but this album is best known for having a majority of their hits and being their most commercially successful album. And I would
Really?
Well, it charted higher than even the debut album.
Yeah, but I feel like that's the one everyone knows all the songs off of.
True, but this one actually had bigger chart hits, if that means anything.
they're just not as memorable apparently. Because like Let the Good Times Roll.
Well, yeah,
and My Best Friend's Girl.
I would probably say so. Those definitely stood the test of time. But at least this one had Drive and You Might Think and Magic and Hello Again, which most of those are probably more so remembered for all the exposure they got on MTV back in the day with all their goofy ass music videos. Like the one Magic where Rick Ocasek, God rest his soul, is walking on water playing a guitar.
I guess the first album was just a more straightforward rock and roll album.
Yeah. Well, with that, I send it off to Justin.
Now we're in the top 5.
Yeah, and this is what Metallica got booted for. So, if anybody's a hard Dave Mustaine hater, you can meet up with the guy who hates Slipknot, and you two can fight me together.
I think I love Dave Mustaine.
I mean, he already mentioned one of, well, most people like. Can't the album name's like right on the front of my brain. It's gone.
Rest in peace.
Yes, but I picked Peace Sells, but Who's Buying? Released separately.
Are you gonna be all right over there?
Hold on, Justin's done.
No.
This commercial break is brought to you by Simicort.
This commercial break's brought.
We're gonna huff and puff,
just like
you do, Grandpa. Well, when you have COPD, sometimes it can be hard to breathe.
This commercial break is brought to you by the great nation of Iran. Extremist. Well,
it's been a good run, guys.
Rip.
Anyway, sorry. I guess slyly bashing Metallica makes me want to die. So, but Peace Sells was released September 19, 1986. It was their second studio album. It's my personal favorite. It just hits hard and heavy and never seems to get old no matter how much I listen to it. Notable tracks include Wake Up Dead, Bad Omen, and I Ain't Superstitious, which defined the album for me personally. It's also the first Megadeth album I listened to, like the second heavy metal album I ever listened to. I believe the first one was a Pantera album. And it was like one afternoon when I was like 11. It was like, you ever listen to metal? No. We're gonna listen to metal. Okay.
Personally, I'm sorry to cut you off there, but personally, I think the best albums are definitely the ones that stand the test of time. Even if a lot of the stuff on my list is dated as fuck. This is basically just a podcast about personal preference and the stuff that we like the most.
I mean, I put Corey Taylor at number 6.
Well, I mean,
our lists aren't really like numerical.
What's it? Well, mine kind of is.
Oh, mine kind of is too.
Quick, everyone get on.
Till I cut out 5 songs from it to make room.
Quick, everyone get on Loudwire and see what Corey Taylor's opinion on our podcast is.
Let's tweet it at him. Your mention. Find out where.
Let's post it on all the Reddits.
Delete it for no self-promotion.
And low effort post.
I put a lot of effort into this. Okay, so we're going into number 5s now. Are you done, actually? I just cut you off.
1, 2,
Sorry.
3, 4. No, I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, you got your number 5, and then we're on 4. So if you want to do 2 and get caught in.
Yeah, that would probably help.
Okay. I guess I'll be doing 2 then. Yay, because, I can only cut 4. I really tried to cut another one, but now fuck it. So my number 5 is the seminal punk classic. And I use the word seminal right here in my paper, as you can see. The people who are listening can't, but...
Okay, I wanted to make sure it wasn't spelled seminal.
Just take a picture of it and make that the thumbnail.
I might do that. That or the whole fucking album underlined.
Seminal, because I'm a goddamn 12-year-old.
Seminal. The town Seaman, Ohio.
Just outside Cincinnati.
Released October 18th, 1977. Motherfucker, dude. I don't fuck this all up. The seminal punk classic. It did stand the test of time. It is the punk album. Never mind the bollocks. Here's the Sex Pistols. A literal perfect storm of an album. Not to say the album's perfect, but every member was so perfect for their role in the creation of the album. Despite being on the credits, Sid Vicious doesn't actually play on the album, thank fucking God.
I was about to say cough, Sid Vicious.
But Glenn Matlock, who was one of the primary songwriters, who actually helped write God Save the Queen, brought the pop sensibilities to the abrasiveness and anarchistic Johnny Rotten, the punk version of Lennon McCartney. Steve Jones provides a tight guitar that always serves a song perfectly with a raw but sweet sound. It's chaotic and sounds like a disaster, but you know he's always in control. Drummer Paul Cook keeps the band together with solid beats throughout. The best way I can describe the album is a controlled frenzy. For such a collection of mid-tempo songs, when you think punk, you think fast. But if you really listen to this album, it's not a very fast album. None of the songs are particularly fast, but they're just aggressive, and they just have this attitude to them. They're punchy, and they really feel faster than they are. I would say that the standouts are Pretty Vacant. One of my favorite trivia bits about that song is the fact that during the later part of the song, they just say, pretty vacant. Johnny Rotten purposely slurs the word vacant to vacant, if you listen closely. Bodies, because, you know, of the section, fuck this, fuck that, fuck it all to hell, fucking brat. Just strikes me right here in the heart.
Now I was thinking, wasn't there one song that Sid Vicious played on and they just kind of buried it in the mix?
Yeah, he plays on, I think it's actually Bodies, and it was really shitty, and it's like buried way in the mix. And if you listen really closely, you can kind of hear it. But Steve Jones pretty much played all the bass lines. And the other standout song I would say is No Feelings, and it's actually the only album released by Sex Pistols, unless you want to count the fucking train wreck that is Great Rock and Roll Swindle, which is like a movie soundtrack, album, parody, comedy bit thing. And speaking of that album, you've seen my copy of it. I don't know if anyone's ever seen a physical record copy of this album. So the songs on the back of the album are in a certain order, like, you know, the track listing. You look at the album, it's a double album. All the songs on the album's sides are in a different order than the ones that's on the back. But then when you play the album, the songs that it says are on the albums are not the songs that are in that order, and they're all just jumbled up across the floor. And I know they fucking did it on purpose, and it still pisses me off so much because it makes finding a track list for this fucking thing like impossible without like going online. You can't just be like, oh yeah, I want to listen to this song. Oh wait, which fucking one is it? I got to listen to all 4 fucking records to figure out which fucking one it is. And with that'll be it for my number 5. And I guess since I'm doing my number 4 also, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, I'm going to John Lennon's first self-titled album. Or, well, it's not really self-titled. John Lennon Plastic Ono Band. Released December 11th, 1970. It's the first solo album by Lennon. It actually features Ringo on drums, and I don't remember if it's on this one or if it's on Imagine, but there's actually George Harrison on guitar on a couple of them.
So it's the Fuck Paul McCartney album.
Okay, so the fun thing, this is going to be a tangent here. Let me make a little note where I'm at. There are numerous times throughout the 70s where all 4 Beatles almost appeared on an album, usually on Ringo albums, like Ringo's first actual studio album, not the fucking one of show tunes. Has a song that John wrote for him, and John plays on. There's one song where Paul, George, and Ringo all play on the song, but there's no John. I think there's some where there's John, Paul, and Ringo, but no George. There's never a John and Paul, but like John, George, and Ringo, but no Paul. Like this like almost happened like 30 times.
Wasn't there that one time though where Paul and John met up?
1974. Yeah, they were at John's apartment in New York City, and they were watching Saturday Night Live, and whoever was hosting was like, "Yeah, we'll give. We know John Lennon lives in New York City, and if he wants to come and bring any of the Beatles with him, we'll give him $25,000 a piece." And they said they almost did it just for shits and giggles, to see if they'd actually pay him, but they just decided against it because they didn't feel like calling a cab. So that was the closest we ever got.
Imagine turning down $25,000 because you don't feel like calling a cab.
Well, I mean, when you're the fucking Beatles. But anyway, they never actually... they actually did record together. John and Paul did one last time. There's a bootleg going around called A Toot and a Snore in 74. That's the last time John and Paul ever played together. And I don't remember who's doing drums, but they just play some really half-assed covers, like some songs from the 50s. And like, it sounds really bad. There's a reason why it's called A Toot and a Snore. But it's not great. Anyway, The actual album itself is dark, real, and rooted in the struggles of life. It's full of themes of, as I wrote, and I quote, abandonment. Because even though I proofread this, I still fucking typed abandonment wrong. It's abandonment. Isolation, helplessness abound. But there are small moments of hope peppered throughout. It's a very raw album with almost no production. It contains John's most heartfelt and most personal lyrics. I would say this album saved me when I was in the darkest part of my life. I would listen to this album like just time and time again on repeat. Of course, it wasn't on repeat because I had to keep getting up and turn the fucking record player back on. But you know, what was I at? It's not devoid of the cheesy love songs and political takes that he became later known for, but they're very short or just not stand out here. It's really a great album if you like personal lyrics, if you like someone really speaking from their heart, from their soul, and talking openly about their struggles, about religion, about, you know, being alone, whatever. I'd say the standout songs for me are Well, 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 which is a fucking rockin' ass song, Isolation, and the song God, which is personally one of my favorite sets of John Lennon lyrics. And then we'll go to number 4 for Mark. Ha! 4-4. Kyle Petty.
Dale Jarrett, the 44, racing the truck.
404 podcast not found.
704 games.
No. But
No, we want the podcast to function.
This podcast has been brought to you by Error.
But no, for mine.
Sorry.
But no, for my number 4, I've got Everything Will Be Alright in the End, also shortened as U-Bait, released on October 7th, 2014 by the American alternative rock band Weezer. And this would be their 9th studio album, produced by the late Rick Ocasek.
Is the one with the fucking weird looking monster thing
Yeah,
on the
it
cover?
is. The one that I got the poster for in my
You know,
room.
when you weren't here, I told Justin to go back there and switch the Weezer poster and the Dale poster, but he didn't. I was like, he'll never even notice.
But yeah,
I'm going to take everything in your room and just rotate it.
Put everything backwards.
Yeah, for this album, I remember it being, it was the beginning of my senior year. I remember this being the first album I got really hyped for, and I followed, like, everything around it at the time. And I remember being so excited because everything I'd heard about it at the time was that Weezer's finally going to release another good album because, like, their last 3 or 4 albums up to that point had actually been...
the Red Album had the meme song that was 5 years out of date when it came out.
I mean, I don't have any problem with a lot of Weezer stuff, to be fair, but the rest of the world seems to. A lot of people, even Weezer fans, actually hate. Well, I guess it's
just
kind
get
of
on the
cool
Weezer subreddit.
yeah, basically. But no, this album is kind of seen as a return to form, of kind of considered kind of up there with like the first 2 albums, and it was even produced by the guy who did produce the first album. And overall, I think it's just a pretty solid power pop, alternative rock kind of jam of an album. And for me,
Justin's gonna eat an apple.
like that Seinfeld episode where George eats an apple over the phone.
Just seemed busy. Hang on here. Let's get this on audio.
I was surprised it still crunched. It looked like it was just going like...
Now, I will say, to be fair, Weezer's one of my favorite bands of all time, and a lot of my friends give me shit, but they're really not that bad.
Oh, loser.
But I mean, I can't really say much if even the fan base hates them. But no, this album's a pretty solid ride from start to finish, and I'd say highlights for me include Ain't Got Nobody, Back to the Shack, and I've Had It Up to Here. And with that, that's
Is that the sequel to Love Shack?
No. Now you got me thinking of that Simpsons episode where they did that glove slap parody. that was the Tobacco episode, I think. But no, off to Justin. What you got for us?
Alright, my number 4. Released July 25th, 1980. Back in Black by AC/DC. Their 7th studio album. This was the first album they released after Bon Scott passed. I wasn't alive then.
What?
Right?
Fucking
I-
boomer.
Okay, boomer.
Really, okay, millennial. But,
Fuck you.
what I read, because I read... Yeah, I've read about the history of AC/DC.
Bam.
All their songs sound the same.
Listen for 2 fucking seconds. Oh yeah, I was supposed to put a disclaimer in. My top 4 is more based on the production side, except for one of them. This is not the one of them. This is purely on production.
Concrete Gold by the Foo
I
Fighters.
feel like a fucking Tool because the first thing that came to mind
Was that a Tool song?
No, I was trying to think of an AC/DC song, and the first thing that came to mind was Foreigner's Double Vision.
But what I read is that when AC/DC announced that they were going to... Fuck. Hold on.
When AC/DC announced they were going to have a live gangbang.
Hold on.
Well, I mean, with some of the songs...
That was cool. I took a bite of apple and my gum started bleeding.
Ooh.
Nice. Shit.
#1 favorite album, Bleeding Gums Murphy, from The Simpsons.
When it came out that AC/DC was making a new album after Bon Scott had died, no one really thought it was going to be good. And in
They were right at the end.
This is number 4 on my list.
They need to do an album with Axl Rose.
They need to do an album about tobacco.
I'm still waiting on that Axl Rose AC/DC album.
Listen. Given the circumstances and my own bias, because, this is the internet and we are all biased.
There's no bias on the internet.
Trump 2020. No, I'm not.
I will delete that.
I ran so far away.
To quote Hillary Clinton, delete your account.
To quote Hillary Clinton, I want you to get in Pokemon Go to the polls.
To quote Hillary Clinton, he killed himself.
I have information leading to the arrest of Hillary Clinton.
I don't want to die yet.
What's that red dot on your forehead?
How dare you mock my religion?
Your brakes went out. What's going to happen when you stop?
Okay, Princess Diana.
Alright.
So Bon Scott. Oh wait, I mean Brian Johnson.
So, this album, in my opinion, is one of the best produced of all time. And that's why it's so high on this list. All the songs...
Sounds the same. I'm cutting and eating an apple. I'm sorry. You're just gonna hear chewing in the background.
It is balanced very well.
It is balanced very well.
And it was also produced by that guy who produced the Cars album I reviewed earlier.
Yep, sure was. I can't remember his name.
Mutt Lange.
Yeah. He set the standard for future...
Produced by Bob Rock and Metallica.
He set the standard for how you produce a goddamn rock album. Peek your fucking microphone. How you like that?
I mean, I've probably been doing it the whole time.
It's happened a few times. It's okay. I don't give a fuck.
But
I can't wait to get ear raped listening to it in playback.
listen to it playback. I'm just going to drink till I pass out.
Well, somehow I'm still keeping it together.
But I think it's a really good album. Produced really well. Considering the
I'm
circumstances.
trying not to cut my hand off. I'm using the wrong knife.
And welcome back to the Cutting the Apple podcast.
This is the Cutting Room Floor podcast. All your favorite unused apple eating sound effects.
Where basically we just leave everything in. There is no cutting.
You want some,
Like that
you
part
want
where
some,
I just...
You want some ASMR?
Like that part where I just kept saying cut, 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 shit, shit, shit.
Want some ASMR?
Oh yeah.
Did that do it for you?
Oh god.
Did that do it for you? Did that do it for you? Okay, I'm done.
We're professional here. So I'm gonna get into my top 3 after I finish chewing this bite of apple.
Do you still have anything to...
Actually, you know what? Speaking of Apple, my album was actually released on the record label Apple.
Hey, what a good segue.
Right? It was a plan from the beginning.
We're part of Big Apple.
My number 3 is the Beatles. Let It Be Naked, specifically. The original version of Let It Be was released May 8th, 1970. However, the Naked version was released November 17th, 2003. It is the 12th and final Beatles album. This version strips away Phil Spector's wall of sound to bring the album more in line with the original intended vision of the album.
That time he killed his wife.
That time he brought a gun into the studio and threatened people. Anyway,
wasn't it the Ramones that he did that too?
Partial song snippets, like the little 40 or 50-second song snippets that were on the original album, have been stripped away, replaced with actual songs that should have been on an album in the first place. Almost every song is from a different take or a composite of different takes from the original. The result is a slightly shorter but much stronger album, held up by the inclusion of John Lennon's Don't Let Me Down, which was left off the original album for some ungodly reason, and features George Harrison's best version of the 3 Let It Be guitar solos. There was one on the original single version, a different one on the album version, and they used a different take for the Let It Be Naked version. This version feels like a true Beatles album and makes a fantastic end cap to the Beatles catalog. The standouts for me here are Don't Let Me Down, which is my personal favorite Beatles song, I've Got a Feeling, which is the last true great Lennon-McCartney composition, and Paul McCartney's classic, of course, Let It Be.
Despite what a lot of people say, I still count that as their last studio album.
I mean, it was recorded before, but it wasn't released until after, so... I mean, they recorded it in January to March 1969, didn't do anything with it, recorded Abbey Road, and then hired people to go back and actually mix and create the fucking album because they didn't want anything to do with it anymore. So, Mark, what's your number 2?
Oh, you mean number 3?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, no, it's Dale Earnhardt. The album.
3 car in the wall! Big wreck behind them!
For our top 10 favorite songs, my number 3 is going to be Hard Charger by Dale Earnhardt.
It's going to be the entirety of the album by Pink Floyd.
The entire 2001 Daytona. Never mind.
I might get up to the last lap.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present you Daytona 500.
Oh, no.
This is it. 3 car in the wall.
I sure hope Dale's okay.
I'm sure he's flying, isn't he?
I present to you the home of the free and the Indianapolis 500.
Get out of here, Steven Tyler. Now, for my number 3, I've got Next Position Please, which is the 7th studio album by the American rock band Cheap Trick and was released on August 15th, 1983 and was produced by Todd Rundgren, which you've heard this name a couple of times before, and I think this is one of the better examples of how I was saying earlier, how some of his albums, when he produces an album, he has a tendency to make it sound like more so like him than the band he's working with, and I think this is a pretty good example of that, which, like, to me, really isn't a bad thing. And this album kind of comes at a downturn in the band's career where the records began to sell less and less and the label started screwing them over and making them work with different people for different albums and kind of dictating what they did. But, I don't know. This
record labels screwing over artists?
Yeah, that's not something I've heard of before. But no, this album happens to be one of the more, like, stripped down kind of productions of all their mid-'80s stuff, which gets the most flack out of their entire discography. And to me, I don't know. I think this album's a pretty solid album, and I would say highlights include I Can't Take It and Borderline, and the title track's pretty good.
We're not gonna take it.
Hey, I think that came out the same year, actually. Could be wrong there, but moving on to you, Justin.
All right. My number 3 is
Dale Earnhardt.
Austin Dillon.
Dale the movie starring Barry Pepper.
Take off that cowboy hat. You're never a cowboy.
I'm not going back to the mill.
Goes back to the mill. All right. Serious for a second. Because this is my...
1.
This is not 1. This is number 3.
That Metallica song 1?
Top 20 songs by being named a numeric value. Go.
Johnny Cash, 13. You just said 1.
I'm trying to think of more. I got nothing.
You're right.
1 is the loneliest number.
Party Like It's 1999. All right, seriously.
I'm 18 by Alice Cooper.
Early 1970 by Ringo Starr.
Summer of '69 by Bryan Adams.
Summer of '69 by me and your mom.
We
Got
are.
my first real 6-string.
Oh God! Played it till my fingers bled.
I bet she did.
Played it till your mom on.
Oh God. Not Andrew.
Ew.
My name's Andrew, but I'm not that one.
The racist president?
No, the one where he. I'm not gonna say it. On
Yeah,
Oh,
this,
yeah.
This is a family podcast.
You love your woman every day of the month.
Never
That is
mind.
what Andrew says.
Never mind the fact that we've said so many fucks and shits throughout this episode.
God damn.
Fucking cock shit, fuck motherfucker.
I got the worst curse of all. Trump is a good president.
You want a stink bug?
I think you deserve one after that.
I'm gonna make Trump eat stink bugs. God, if I cooked the president's food, I would just put a fucking stink bug in his meal every day.
I just take a shit in it.
He's probably one of those people that has someone else eat half of his food before he does, so he makes sure it's
I'll tell him which half doesn't have the shit in it.
Okay, for real though. Where are we at?
I think we're on 2 now.
Number 3.
Oh yeah, it's Justin.
Right.
These top 3 are all pretty much interchangeable for me. But I'm going to get the personal bias out of the way first. I put it at number 3 because I was biased.
Megalomaniac by
Megalomart sells propane.
Hey Megalomaniac.
Bobby, leave the room.
You bastard.
Take your damn batteries back.
This album was released on June 24th, 2008. Sound of Madness by Shinedown.
Damn, I thought it was gonna be.
Isn't
He said
that-
2008. I thought it was gonna be 21st Century Breakdown.
Isn't that also the name of a Simon and Garfunkel song that Sturdy
Yes.
ruined?
Yes. It is their 4th studio album. This album defined most of my teenage years, and even now I find myself going back to it. Because,
Is that the one with the 45 song?
no,
Oh.
thank God.
Is that the one with Bully on it?
No, that's Bully.
Oh.
The game by Rockstar?
I forgot about that.
No, this is the one that's got, like...
Bully 2 is coming out someday, man.
Just like Half-Life 3, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, they did announce that Half-Life VR.
No, this is the only time the band ever recorded as a 5-piece. Ever. They had, I believe his name, Carrie Fisher?
Oh,
Yeah, I
Princess
know.
Leia!
Not that Carrie Fisher!
Rip.
I could be slightly off on the name. I've had a lot to drink, and I was reading Wikipedia articles like 2 hours ago. So take that for what you want.
I'm still reading Wikipedia articles, to be fair.
I'm still finding spelling errors on the list.
Yeah, especially this next one. Brent Smith's voice carries so much raw emotion and weight.
Carrie.
This is another one, like I said, where production value really elevates it to me. Rob Cavallo. Just a
Guy who produced some shitty Green Day album called 21st Century Breakdown. Produced by Rob Cavallo and Green
Pretty
Day.
sure he also produced a My Chemical Romance album.
Yeah, just Rob Cavallo. Just he's just a small name in the industry. You probably haven't heard of him.
No one's heard of him in the last 20 years.
Fuck you. Rockefeller is a master.
Sorry, I should say
producer.
last 10 years.
It's not a typical choice because, I mean, who's going to put a post-grunge alternative rock band in their top 3? But,
I almost put Bush in there, so.
I don't think
Great
so.
Blade Suitcase, bud.
but this is very much a, when I was very sad, I'd listen to this and just feel better.
A young boy.
Not that! I don't admit to listening to that, even though I just admitted that on the internet.
Oh.
I'm going to go burn my MCR shirts. The top 2 are canceled. Thank you.
Come on, Iran, kill us.
I'm going to stop before I get sad. I'm done.
Speaking of stopping before getting sad. That's what she said.
How many times does this happen?
At me the last time I had sex.
Oh.
Okay,
I
so
wish that was a joke.
Oh.
I would say that my number 2 is probably the most controversial choice on my whole fucking list.
It is the Spice Girls debut album.
I mean, I was looking for that fucking
NASCAR
Wannabe
goes
song.
country.
No, it's released November 18th, 1997.
Oh,
The 7th studio album by Metallica, Reload.
really?
Yeah,
I
boys.
can't remember. Is that the one with Fuel on it, or is that
That's the
Load?
one with Fuel on it.
Give me
Ooh.
fuel, give me fire.
This is the last studio album to feature Jason Newsted, unless you want to count the covers album, but it's the follow-up to the controversial Load album. Was originally intended to be a double album. However, these were the songs that were left unfinished when the band decided to take a small tour to get out of the studio. Most fans hate this one, just not as much as Saint Anger. It's fast, it's heavier than Load, and it's really catchy. James's voice and songwriting are at their peak here. Sure, it's different than the 80s, but I don't find it any better or worse than the classic James Hetfield voice. It's equally as good, just different. Most of this album has never been played live. I think they've only played like 3 songs live from it. Standouts are my personal favorite song of all time, The Unforgiven 2, the unplayed album closer Fixer, which is one of their best songs ever, and Devil's Dance, which might be the heaviest fucking guitar riff I've ever heard in my life. And that's going to be for my number 2, my controversial. So yeah, I picked it over Puppets just because I felt like it was easier to put Master of Puppets on my list. I love both of those albums equally, but I gave it to Reload because I don't feel like anyone likes Reload but me, so...
That's why I...
So you're like me and you're a hipster. Pick the stuff that everybody hates.
No, he doesn't like Saint Anger.
Oh.
No one... Well,
Nobody likes...
people try to defend it on the Metallica
I
Reddit,
tried to review Saint Anger track by track. I listened to Frantic 6 times in a row and I wanted to die.
Tick, 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 tick.
Tock,
There is a meme video of that out there on the internet.
Kill, 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 kill.
My
It's also from
lifestyle.
Saint Anger.
Determines my lifestyle.
Kirk Hammett line.
Determines my lifestyle.
Clank, clank,
Hammett
clank.
line.
You know what else is different from with Metallica from the 80s to the 90s? Cliff Burton being alive.
Oh, ouch.
But I mean, Jason Newsted was also their bass player in 1987, so... And he gave us probably their most complicated album, Injustice for All. I love Cliff, but I'm just saying, their most technical album's Justice. But that's
Listen.
Jason Newsted.
Listen.
I love Cliff, but Jason's my favorite. Alright, Mark, what's your number 1?
Or you mean number 2? Number 2.
Wait.
Yeah.
Yeah. I fucked this all up somehow.
I think we're all kind of...
It's because when we did the honorable mentions, I did mine last, so
And you
like...
had that extra album in there
Yeah.
on accident.
It's all fucked up. It's okay, go Mark. You're number
It's
2.
whatever. For my number 2, I've got the
This is
fourth...
professional.
Number 2,
Only the
I've
best.
got Tim, which was the 4th studio album released by the Replacements on October 14th, 1985 on Sire Records. This would be the first major label released by the band and was actually produced by Tommy Ramone, who was the drummer of the Ramones at the time. And this would also be the last studio album
There's
by...
someone in the Ramones named Ramone?
They're all named Ramon.
I didn't... Well, no, the guys...
Wait.
I'm pretty sure...
Next you're going to tell me that the only guy in ZZ Top without a beard, his last name's Beard.
That is...
Oh no, actually, if I remember reading through my vinyl copy, the original credits has him listed as his original name was just Air Delisle or something like that. It's just easier to say Ramone. But no, this was also the last
At
album.
the U.S. government when Chinese immigrants coming over, your name's Ying Yang Yong.
That guy who got fired from the news broadcast for that plane crash, and it was the name's released Bing Ding Ow, holy fook. But no, this was also the last album.
That guy who got fired from was it ESPN? Who said, "Yeah, Juan Pablo Montoya is probably out getting a taco."
Oh.
Can't say that. And Jimmy Spencer dropped a cigar.
But no, this was also the last
I'll show
album.
you a Jimmy Spencer camel car.
This is also the last album to feature the guitar player, the original guitarist Bob Stenson, who was either kicked out of the band or fired around this time, which is kind of funny because it doesn't really make sense to say he was fired at this time, because in the biography it says that they'd considered firing him because of his excessive drug and alcohol use, which makes no fucking sense because this band was a mess.
Dave Mustaine, alcoholic Dave Mustaine.
I mean, he eventually got clean.
And then he got throat cancer.
But
Probably
no,
from all the alcohol and smoking.
I would say this is one of the albums to define the later half of my senior year, and highlights to me include Hold My Life, Kiss Me on the Bus, and Bastards of Young. Which, funny story about that one, Bastards of Young, is one of their only TV appearances. So this band is best known for being like a bunch of alcoholics and fucking up a lot of their shows on purpose. And when they went on Saturday Night Live, which was, this was around the time the album came out, they played this live, and they were just kind of stumbling around the whole time, fucking up the song because they were all out of their minds at this point. And they got kicked off the show permanently just because, like, lead singer Paul Westerberg barely mumbled the word fuck off camera, and the producers of the show didn't like that. Which you could barely tell if you ever watched the video. But still, this album deserves all the praise it gets, and it's a personal favorite of mine. And I would say it's probably my favorite out of their discography. You, Justin.
Alright, this one's number 2, because if I didn't put number 1 at number 1, as much as I want it to be number 2 over this one, I'd probably hate myself, and I'd probably be spit roasted by the entire internet.
I'm sure we will.
Bukake is just a baby shower.
Having a baby's just keeping semen as a pet.
Can we cut that out?
I'm not wrong.
Doesn't make you right.
It doesn't make me wrong either.
This is r/make me suffer, just in audio form.
Oh no.
r/cringe. Hey baby
let's
girl.
Let's just do another episode of the podcast where we just read Reddit
Just
posts.
scrap the entire podcast, throw the computer out the window.
Alright, my number 2 album.
Which means it's shit.
No.
People Equal Shit, the Slipknot song?
Yes. I agree with the title
That
of the
Replacements live album, When the Shit Hits the Fans, which is a perfect example of them being fucked up on stage.
Alright, so my number 2 was released April 12th, 2011. It's Wasting Light by the Foo Fighters. It's their 7th studio album. My favorite band. My favorite album. It's also slightly skewed because Booch Big, another, barely.
Some guy who produced like 3 albums people know.
Yeah, just Nevermind, and you got Kurt Cobain that layers vocals, and, because John Lennon did it.
Did he produce a Green Day album? Or
Yeah.
am I wrong?
Yeah, he did. I can't remember
I
which
don't know
one.
which one either, but yeah, he did.
I
I think it was the newest one.
But he's actually, no jokes, fucking iconic producer.
Yeah, there's a picture of me where I was dressed up like Butch Vig one year.
I fucking love Booch Big. But,
He's also the drummer for Garbage.
Is this the album with the best, the best, the best?
No, that was like 2004.
yeah, that was like,
Oh,
yeah, you're a little
damn.
behind, bud.
Oof.
But I can, iconic songs include the entire album, because fuck you. But to be specific, Bridge Burning, Rope, White Limo, I Miss the Misery, just to name a few. Walk is also on there, which gave us probably my favorite music video of all time, because it involves Dave Grohl getting stuck in a traffic jam, stepping in dog shit. It's pretty great.
He stepped on a Foo Fighters album?
Now, as soon
No,
as
he stepped on a whole album.
as soon as you said I Miss the Misery, my ears perked and I thought of that Hailstorm song. Whoa!
Trust me, even when I'm like going through the tracks on the album, I'm just like, as soon as I see it, it's just like, just for half a second, it's just like there. I was like, no. But this is one album. If I'm not in the mood to listen to anything, and I'm not a podcast, I'll put up this album on repeat because
So he gets in the mood.
Hey, that's a Robert Plant song.
It's also...
I will come over this table.
It's on the
fucking ass.
same album as Big Log.
I'll give you a big log.
So speaking of thinking of other people that are turned on that you don't want to think about being turned on,
Oh no.
on the first Rush album, I'm pretty sure it's the first Rush album, there's a song that was written solely by Geddy Lee called In the Mood, and it's about Geddy Lee being horny. And that's one guy I never want to think of with a boner. Geddy Lee and a stiffy with that fucking silk outfit from the fucking 2112
If I
album.
remember right, I was reading in that book, the Replacements used to fuck around with people, and sometimes they'd go and play shows under the codename Gary and the Boners. And they got a song on their album Let It Be called Gary's Got a Boner.
I don't got anything else I can say about the album. It's great. Producer's great.
Boner.
Band's great. Have a Foo Fighters tattoo.
Megalome March Price's feels so good.
Number 1, Chuck Mangione's feels so good now.
I'm gonna try not to talk out my ass.
My
here in a
name's
minute
not
about my
Chick.
top. So yeah, go ahead, AJ. Give us your top.
So, I'm just gonna name off some names real quick because, as like I said, as we were going through, I crossed them out, and I'm just gonna say them and then talk
Honorable
about them.
mentions to Electric Boogaloo.
These are the albums that made the list when we thought it was top 15, and then some point in the last year it became top 10.
I'll give you that.
So, I had on here Cowboys from Hell by Pantera, which I took out. Heavy Metal Music by Newstead, which is funny because that's one of the ones I just added for tonight.
I almost thought you were talking about that Lou Reed album for a second.
I took out the Pink Spiders' Teenage Graffiti. Unfortunately,
That's a
love
pretty good
that
album.
goddamn album.
It was also produced by Rico Kasich.
And then I cut out Razorblade Romance by him. But anyway,
Razorblade Suitcase by Bush.
it was almost on my list too. Gee grief, that's the wrong page. All right, coming in at number 1, which I'm sure everyone know. Actually, I'm just gonna say that my albums weren't really, I guess, in too much of a particular order. Like, I had them numbered 15 to 1, and I guess they kind of were, but at the same time, not really. That my number 1 album has Dave Grohl on it,
Hell yeah.
produced by Butch Vig
Hell
at
yeah.
Sound City Studios.
Hell yeah.
It's the culmination of everything we've talked about here today.
I am already rock hard.
It's also from the 90s.
Ooh.
We have released September 21st, 1991, the second album and major label debut of Nirvana, Nevermind. The album that defined the early part of the 90s, and I wrote a fucking, like, way more than I wrote about any other album.
To be fair, when this podcast started, we were going to write fucking, like, 10-page essays on every album, which was my stupid idea.
But I wrote, like, 2 solid paragraphs, and I'm just going to read it instead of talking out my ass, because it'll get over a lot faster that way. This album defined the early part of the 90s and put an end to the 80s glam almost entirely. A pop songwriting masterclass throughout, Kurt delivers incredible melody with some of the hookiest songs ever written, with a voice that changed the world and shaped a generation. The guitars are heavy and crunchy, but also very punk rock and in your face. When clean, here's my wonderful creative writing class I took in high school, they shine and shimmer beautiful, but are instantly recognizable. The bass is groovy, always on point, always doing exactly what it needs to be doing to best suit the song. Chris Novoselic is a hugely underrated bass player, and I would be remiss not to include the powerful drumming of Dave Grohl, bringing it all together in a way that only he can.
Hell yeah.
I like Dave Grohl as a drummer.
I fucking love Dave Grohl.
I just don't like him as a songwriter because I think he writes shitty songs about objects on his bedside at night.
Hey.
Rope.
Alarm clock.
Monkey wrench.
Roll of toilet paper. But like I said, the album was produced by Butch Vig. It was his first like major label production. It's the album that really put him on the map as a producer. Mixed by Andy Wallace, which is the name I don't rarely hear very often anymore, but it has a very rock candy style production. It's very slick, and it's just easy to lose how aggressive a lot of the album is at its core. It tackles dark subject matter, personal demons, suicide, rape, and just plain weird and gross love interests with medical themes. It's the album that inspired me to play guitar and to try my hand at songwriting. Though I would say In Utero is just as well a classic album and every bit as good, which contains my all-time favorite Nirvana songs, I ended up choosing Nevermind because of the way it forever changed my life and set me on the path that I'm on now musically. And then I'm going to draw a little Nirvana smiley face here. That's terrible, but you know, that's what I did. There we go. There you go, Marky.
And then on albums that like pretty much set the tone for how
I'm gonna lick or crack when you're not looking.
like
We still gotta have our advertisement break.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and do that.
Now we'll get to that after.
What we gotta save the
What phrase are you looking at my notes for?
Forever changed my life musically because I'm a drunk dumbass. But no, speaking of albums that forever changed our lives musically, I would say this number one for me is the one that pretty much set the tone for the rest of my life and my taste in music for the
Anima
rest
of
of
the
my life.
State by Blink-182.
No, but you're close. This would be Neighborhoods, which is the sixth studio album by Blink-182, released on September 27th, 2011. And it was their first album in over 8 years following their breakup and eventual reunion, and was self-produced by the band because their longtime producer had died of a brain hemorrhage in 2008. And then by that point, everybody just kind of learned how to do their own shit. But no, this album pretty much set the tone for me because this was like the first album that really got me into like listening to, well, a lot of people around me would say video game music's not real music, but that's just what I listened to a majority of my like youth. And then it was like my freshman year in high school when this album came out, and it just blew me the fuck away. And it's been my top favorite ever since, and I have so many memories tied to this album. And to me, I would say Tom DeLonge is half the reason I even play guitar. It's a huge inspiration to me. Even though he's an alien hunting whack job now.
Angels and Airways. Dale Jr. loves them. Angels and Airways. Jr.
Yeah, they're pretty good too. And most people would say this is just an Angels and Airwaves record, but really, if you look at it, it just kind of picks up where everybody left off when they kind of broke up. But to me, I would say highlights of the album include like Heart's All Gone, Up All Night, Love is Dangerous, and Even If She Falls. And to me, I'll end it on that.
So,
Shalom.
I actually realized that in my 2-paragraph essay, I didn't name a single song that I liked from Nevermind. So I'm gonna say just right now, Lounge Act, Drain You, and fucking
I love that song.
Fucking the unreleased B-side.
the Sound City Sappy. But no, yeah, let's go with those two. All right, Justin, what's your numero? Actually, we have a break here. This is going to be Whose Dick is the Biggest contest.
One to go, sponsored by Credit One Bank.
Yeah, I mean, there we go. Mark, whip out your penis and let's measure it.
I'd rather not.
So how are we going to... Our sponsor wants us to... We have to please the sponsor, Mark. You can...
What if my girlfriend's my sponsor?
That might be why she wants to...
Oh.
Just... I'll vote Tim Richmond.
What the hell has this turned into?
This is a very professional and well thought out and well executed
Like I stated,
series of events.
a series of unfortunate events, that Jim Carrey movie.
That book series.
Hey, like I said earlier, this is a family podcast.
Yep, my dog is joining us.
Alright, we're gonna keep our dicks put up.
What if
My
Harambe...
daughter walked in the room.
That's not what Harambe would have wanted.
All right, my number one favorite song is that Harambe song.
That's not it, but... Terrible. Okay.
If you had one shot to capture a child in your enclosure, would you capture it or just let it slip?
Mom spaghetti.
That's number 2.
Oh.
So, I don't know why we saved me for last. Mine's kind of anticlimactic. But, I put A Hard Day's Night on my honorable mentions so I could put this album at number 1. Released December 3rd, 1965. 6th studio album by the Beatles. Rubber Soul.
Right, I always forget Helpless 5.
Yep, Helpless 5. It strikes that perfect middle ground for me with... I'm not the hugest fan of Beatlemania Beatles because I feel like they made a lot of songs just to make songs. I mean, wouldn't you if you were making ass loads of money?
2 albums a year.
Right?
Back when that would actually work.
And you could go to stadiums and basically not even play because even with, like a full Marshall stack, you were drowned out by 70,000 people.
Didn't they just say fuck it and just make fun of retarded people?
No.
I thought there was like a clip where they were just like fucking around making a bunch of noises and stuff. And
don't know. But I feel like once technology caught up and Beatlemania died down a little bit, this is about the same time the Rubber Soul came out. It
Oh yeah, the last album they toured in support of Revolver.
Yep.
Barely.
It strikes that it's that good middle ground.
It's a Bob Dylan album.
Okay, yeah. The sitars and Norwegian Wood.
They all pretty much said they were just copying Bob Dylan. It's a great album.
It's a good bridge into what is the psychedelic age.
Is this the one that's got that song that Pearl Jam covered?
You
got to hide your love. Well,
That's on Help.
crap.
Yeah, that's gonna help. And that was an Eddie Vedder single. That was not a Pearl Jam cover.
Unfortunately.
He did the cover for a soundtrack for a movie, I believe. But yeah, like it has Norwegian Wood, Think for Yourself, Michelle.
Run for Your Life.
Yep, Run for Your Life. Wait, In My Life. I've Just Seen a Face. It's basically named the whole album, but the whole album is really good. It's a great album.
Love Rubber Soul.
I know everyone wants to get hard on the super psychedelic Sgt. Pepper's. That don't do it for me. Sgt. Pepper's is probably like my second least favorite album. Not even gonna lie, but yeah, that's all I got. So if you listen to this whole thing, I'm sorry.
So let's have one more round robin here. What's it? Just one. It doesn't matter which one. What's an album you really hate, Mark?
That's actually really tough for me to say because, like, usually when I listen to an album from start to finish...
Let's do this. What's your least favorite album by your favorite band?
That's really fucking easy. That's really fucking easy.
I guess Make Believe by Weezer.
Concrete Gold by the Foo Fighters. What's it gonna be, bud?
I guess.
What's it gonna be?
Who can it be now?
Well, I don't know what my favorite band is, so...
Pick one. I don't give a fuck. Name them all. I don't care.
Okay, I'll just pick the easy way. I don't say Saint Anger, so fuck it.
But your lifestyle determines your death style.
Clank, 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 clank. Trash can drums intensify.
Ours is
I got a wheelbarrow.
Oh no.
Wheelbarrow.
Oh, poor baby.
She likes wheelbarrow. Alright, guys. That's gonna wrap up episode 2 of the Remote Control Podcast.
See you in 2 years.
It's only been 1 week since our last episode. It's been
1 week.
Ben. We're gonna come at you next week.
With hard-hitting politics and news.
We're gonna recap the 2017 NASCAR season.
We're gonna come back with some gritty social commentary.
Now, if anything, we might actually do like top 10 or top 15 favorite songs, just to have something else to ramble on about endlessly for hours. Ramble on. Now we're really gonna get caught.
Oh no! Hey, you said talk about stuff you hated.
Well, yep. That's gonna wrap up episode 2. We'll see you next week for the next episode. Thank you.